And now, all the way from the other side of the pond, it's the Tea Party Power Hour with Mark Gillar.
Welcome to the Tea Party Power Hour. I am your host, Mark Gillar. Today we have with us Mr. Jared Julia. He is the author of The Red Offenders Critical Feather Theory. And first of all, Jared, welcome to the show.
Oh, thanks so much for having me.
And I have to say, I really admire someone who doesn't just sit around and talk about things, but actually goes out and does something about it. And as I understand, this book, other things you have going on, all started when your children were in a rural Maine school, and you just couldn't believe the woke garbage that they were being taught in school. Is that a fair assessment of how it got started?
Yeah, I mean, I guess like every parent, I kind of had this sinking feeling that there was something that wasn't right about how my kids were being taught. And, at some point, you kind of say, hey, am I the only one seeing this? So you wonder, but you can't really, I think a lot of parents, they can't put their finger on it, exactly what's going on, exactly what's wrong. And, to be honest, I didn't really have the time to deal with it because, I had a stressful job. I was traveling a lot. So I was always catching a plane or living out of a suitcase. But then the pandemic came along and suddenly it was locked down and I was at a desk in my office in my basement. And suddenly I had the time and I really started researching what is going on in our education system.
I think it's interesting that during the pandemic time, some of the schools knew that what they were doing was going to provoke anger from the parents. And there were some schools that were telling the parents, during this whole time of teleschool or Zoom school or whatever you want to call it, they were saying,
Right.
you're not allowed to, the parents aren't allowed to watch. I'm thinking like hell.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it was amazing. But tell me if you can remember, was there a specific thing that sort of, well, I hate to use the word triggered, but set this off? Or was there something where they came home one day and they showed you something they were doing and you just said, all right, that's it. I can't stay on the sidelines anymore. I've got to do something about this.
Well, there was one interesting situation where we went for a parent teacher meeting. And there was this one woman in our school system who taught writing. And she was teaching the students that we're a patriarchal society and women are the women are most oppressed in our society than in other societies. And I thought, wow, that's what you're teaching my kids. So I went to the parent teacher meeting and I said, look, I talked about Margaret Thatcher being the prime minister of England in the 80s at a time when in most Muslim countries, women were not even allowed to drive a car or even sit in the front seat of a car. So you have a woman in the 80s literally driving the British government, and women in other countries can't even drive cars. And she actually knew the law, the set of laws that governed prevented women from doing a lot of different things socially in these countries. And yet she was teaching the opposite. She apologized to me. And then, and I thought that was the end of it. But then the next year, I'm talking with a neighbor, and she was back to teaching the exact same thing, that we're the most oppressed. And that's when I realized this isn't the same fight that is the typical fight between left and right, where the guy on the left believes that he's right and the guy on the right believes that he's right. We have a group of people, a group of educators that know that what they're teaching is factually incorrect and it doesn't matter. And I thought, wow, why is that happening?
Well, it's part of what I think Gramsci called the long, slow march through the institutions. And make no doubt about it, the education system is one of those institutions. I mean, when my son was in college, he was bringing home math books and showing me how they had found a way to slip a little bias into
Yeah.
that. Now he's in his 30s now, so he that was way before woke. But even back then, they were trying to slip ideology into subjects where they did not belong. So let's say,
And
go
yeah,
ahead.
and to that point, Mark, the Seattle public school system was the first one to really teach math as a way that to explain that it oppresses Black people. And then the San Diego school system was the second major public school system to take on that curriculum, where unlike what your son experienced in college, where there was a lot of math and a little bit of CRT, this was like a lot of CRT and sprinkling in a little bit of math. So it's just got worse.
Gotcha. Now, in my son's case, again, we're talking a decade ago, and it wasn't CRT. It was more just slipping in liberal ideology. So I wanted to I wanted to clarify that. But
Sure.
we see so much of this in the schools, and we see all the weird stuff with. I read a story about a substitute teacher, and she showed up to teach class that day, and there was a boy there who kept meowing, and the kids in the class laughed and said, well, he identifies as a cat, and he won't do anything unless you meow to him. And she's like, well, that's crazier than hell. I'm going to send this kid down to the principal's office, and we'll continue with class. I don't have time for this. Well, the principal calls her aside and says, in order to be a substitute teacher in our system, you have to be willing to teach the kids. That means all the kids, even the ones who identify as a cat. So you are hereby relieved of your substitute teaching status or whatever the heck it was. So that's how crazy schools are getting. I mean, in the old days, if when I was in school, and I'm 60, if there was a kid that it started acting like a cat, they would have sent him to a local mental hospital or whatever institution. Now it's like they cuddle the kid and they completely support that. It's weird.
Yeah, I mean, and you're not the only one that thinks that all the teachers that taught you growing up would never put up with what's going on right now. I mean, it is insane that, my son, who graduated from college just this past year, when he was in high school about 5 years ago, there were kids identifying as a different animal. But, that's the thing, when a boy can identify as a girl or a girl can identify as a boy, you really break down a barrier. And now you open it up to different animals, all kinds of things. But it's very disturbing because this kind of paves the way for a lot of stuff that I think a lot of people are not going to be to be comfortable with.
That's putting it mildly. And there are places where in the boys' restroom they now have tampon machines.
Yeah.
It's getting crazy, and nobody knows really specifically what to do about it. It's even though we know that this is all part of the socialist effort to wipe away the individual, if you will. That's why they're all about,
yes.
They love divorce. They love people shacking up and not getting married. They love situations where, you've got these, in fact, I'm aware of a relationship where you have these polyamorous people. Yeah, that's a great word, isn't it? And I actually know someone whose son, this gentleman's divorced, and his son has been exposed to that because the ex-wife and her new boyfriend are all about being polyamorous. And the son is now over 18 and away from home, but, he was a kid in high school, and God knows what kind of a three-ring sexual circus was going on in that house. So again, this all seems to be part of this socialist movement to wipe away the belief in God, wipe away the family unit, wipe away any feelings of individuality. It's all about the collective. But so it's here.
Right.
Jared Julia is upset about it. He sees it in the schools, and unlike most people who just gripe, you decided you were going to get up and do something about it. So talk to me about that. What did you begin doing once this just became too much?
Yeah, well, once it's been said that knowledge is power, and once you realize that by wiping away the family, wiping away a belief in God, that what they're doing is those are the building blocks of society, because that's really the agenda. The agenda is not so that boys can put on dresses or that little kids can identify as cats. The agenda is the destruction of our society. And so our tax dollars are paying schools to erode our society and to erode our civilization. And so that's, once you understand that that's the overall mission of woke, then you know better how to go after it. You know better how to you understand better how to really fight against it. And one way not to do it is the way I initially did it, where I challenged a teacher. I think an individual parent trying to fight this is so very, very difficult. There's so many parents' rights groups out there. There's so many homeschooling organizations that give support to homeschooling parents. There's so many of those that my advice is for parents to join one of those organizations, join forces with them, and try to fight it that way. To fight it by yourself, like I tried to, just seems to be a losing proposition, because it's not like, arguing with your liberal cousin or your liberal buddy at the diner. It's they know that what they're saying is factually incorrect. And like I said, that doesn't matter to them.
I don't think it matters to them at all. And again, you nailed it when you said that this is not about making little kids feel free to be a cat or some of the other stuff going on. It's just like the whole border wall thing. It's not about any particular race. It's not about helping the people who come over the wall or however they get here. It's about power. It's about holding on to the power, and they view people coming over the southern border as being votes for the party. And so what happens then is they start trying to let as many people come in illegally as possible. And all these things are really, really deceptive, very insidious. They give the impression of trying to help and being, a bleeding heart type that really cares about all these people. But, if they really cared about lives, they wouldn't be in favor of abortion, quite frankly. So.
Right. Yeah. I mean, a lot of this is, I love the fact that during the State of the Union, Biden refers to the person that killed Laken Riley, that he was an illegal. Mm-hmm. And then he was forced by the left to apologize for calling her an illegal, or calling her killer an illegal. And really what this comes down to, this is why I created the characters, the Red Offenders. Mm-hmm. They are symbolic of the Gang of Four from the Cultural Revolution in China. And basically, one of the big things that they were able to do to destroy that society was they co-opted the language. They were able to determine what certain words meant. That's why in my book, you have these silly little birds burning all the dictionaries, because they need to burn all the dictionaries so that the woke overlords can change the definitions of words. So we can no longer say illegal alien. Now we must say, undocumented immigrant, or now it's really just immigrant, even though these people are clearly here illegally. So they don't really care about the law. They care about the language, because this battle is being fought over, or one of the weapons that they use is the language. And like you were saying, they do weaponize, our compassion for different people. We hate to think that people are being taken advantage of, and that the children are being molested by these coyotes that are bringing them over the border and stuff like that. And these things are being weaponized for a very bad agenda. And we need to see the whole picture. And that's why I try to make it accessible, even though others have written about this in a very academic way. I wanted to make it accessible with silly little talking birds and kind of funny situations, so that people can understand really what we're up against.
I think it's interesting that, again, you've hit it on the head as far as these people not really caring. And I was arguing with this very liberal woman about, in person, I might add, not over social media, about having immigration laws for a reason, and that this isn't an anti-immigrant thing. If people come here legally, we love them. My great-grandparents on both sides were all immigrants. And it's really just about taking a look at the bad that comes with it, the crime that comes with it, the sexual trafficking, the
Right.
drug trafficking. And, again, she was making the argument, oh, no, these people are actually better than Americans. They commit less crimes. They're not involved in all this
Wow.
stuff you say
Yeah.
they're involved in. So then I remember asking a very specific question. How many immigrants do you plan to have at your house?
Yeah.
And she said,
You
I
know,
don't understand what you're saying. She goes, I don't understand. Why are you asking me? I mean, that's what tax money's for. And I just thought, yeah, you guys are very generous with other people's money. But anyway, you were about to say
yeah,
something.
and we're seeing older people and veterans that have paid into the tax system for decades, and they're being asked to leave their senior living facilities. A veteran in Ohio was asked to leave his home so that he could make room for an illegal. Here in Maine, a 60-unit building was built in Brunswick, Maine, for disadvantaged low-income families, but instead it's being filled by these migrants, these illegal aliens that are coming in.
Yeah.
So your tax money is not going to you, and it's not even going to the most vulnerable people in our society. It's going to people that should not be here.
Oh, yeah. And there are a lot of immigrant kids, illegal immigrant kids who are ending up in the Child Protective Services system, and they've gotten to the point now where they can't find foster homes to take them. They cannot find orphanages, for lack of a better term, to take them. So they are literally putting these kids up in hotels, and they are having CPS people actually stay with them in these rooms. And oftentimes you've got a teenage kid who's, 6'4", 230 pounds, and you've got a couple of secretaries from the CPS office, because they're making everybody, whether they have any training in that area or not, stay with these kids in these hotel rooms, and they have to have armed guards with the CPS workers because of what's going on. I mean, and somebody somewhere is paying for all of that. And listen, I'm as compassionate as the next guy. I think we should do everything we can to help. But once we empty our coffers, there's nothing left. And
yeah, but this isn't an accident. And I wanted, because in my second book that's coming out in May, the main characters go to a college, Bird College, and the book is called Victimus Maximus, because that's the motto of the college. But then the third book that I'm still working on, I don't know when I'm going to release it, is Woke City. And it talks about a lot of the things that you're talking about, because, the woke has infected the culture, but it's not by accident, because when you look at all of these illegals, they've let in more people in the last 3 years than the population of the 36 different cities. So what they've done is according to the Electoral College, they've added 13 electoral votes to Democrats by letting in all of these illegals, because it's not based on legal residents. It's based on just the people living there. Right. So this is very much a purposeful effort. This is intentional. And that's why when Texas tries to secure the border, Biden administration is literally fighting against him. That's why I don't understand why anyone who says, Biden wants stricter, laws for immigration. It's like he has the same laws on the books that Trump had for his administration.
Right.
Any kind of talk about new legislation is just a ruse. And it's not even an enforcement problem. They want this, and they're even fighting against Texas to let more people illegally into this country. It's I think more people need to fully understand the big picture.
Well, didn't we find out a couple of weeks ago that the Biden administration has actually flown over 300,000 illegal immigrants into the United States? Now, tell me how 50 years ago it would have gone over if the president of the United States would have been caught flying illegal immigrants into the country so they didn't have to get caught down at the border, actually bringing them into the country and releasing them. I mean, basically, it
wouldn't have happened 10 years ago.
Yeah.
No one would have put up with it 10 years ago, not 50.
I agree with you. I went too far back. But that's the kind of thing where they'd be talking treason and the death penalty for a president who had done something like that. Let's take a quick break, do a little business with America, try to pay a few bills, and then we will be right back to continue our discussion with Jared Julia and his book, The Red Offender's Critical Feather Theory. And we are back with Jared Julia, the author of The Red Offender's Critical Feather Theory. Probably a Freudian slip from our earlier conversation. But I'm going to catch it for that one, but I don't care. Now, one important question I have to ask you, not that these others haven't been, but what you're doing is a little risky in a sense. I know your kids are out of school, mine is too, but we're looking at the FBI thinking that anybody who shows up at a school board meeting and complains is some kind of a domestic terrorist. They're trying to label us. And what's that been like for you? Have there been any ramifications regarding your neighbors thinking, you're some kind of a right-wing conspiracy nut or something? What's gone on with you personally?
I mean, fortunately, it's been pretty, I've had a pretty good experience. I've been, I haven't had any real negative experiences. I've been very blessed with a lot of these different parents that care about their kids' education, and they've used their social media platform to help me promote my book. So I really haven't had to do much of my own marketing. But yeah, I haven't run into some of the problems that I hear from other people. Now that I say that, it'll probably change for the worse. But yeah, I've been fortunate so far, but I understand the danger. I understand that there is a risk to putting yourself out there with this messaging because we don't really have free speech in this country any longer, unfortunately.
No, we really don't. It's sad. It's becoming very similar to a banana republic where you speak your mind and the next thing you know, somebody is knocking at your door. I remember reading a story about one woman who had the feds, the FBI, knock on her door, and they wanted to know if she could prove that she wasn't at the J6 rally listening to Trump. Now, that's an interesting concept. We need you to prove to us that you weren't there. She goes, well, what makes you think I'm there? Well, we got a call from one of your neighbors. Okay, but, you can track my phone. You know where my phone was. So my phone wasn't there that day. That's how you're getting a lot of these people. So she went to her planner, her day planner, and said, I wasn't in D.C. that day, let alone at that rally or riot or whatever you want to call it. And so they eventually believed her and left her alone. But isn't it interesting that somebody calls in and says, my neighbor's kind of a right-wing wacko. I bet she was at that J6 thing. And instead of saying, well, let's check the phone and see where the phone was that day, so forth and so on, they just show up at your door and say, we need you to prove you weren't there. So this crap it's getting out of control. And nobody likes a badge-heavy cop, but it's really not a problem at the local level right now, at least not in our town. It's a problem with the FBI. It's a problem, with all these alphabet agencies. They knock on your door and, they think it's old Soviet KGB Russia, man.
Right. Well, I was just going to say that if you heard that story during the Cold War, you would have presumed that the country was the Soviet Union.
Exactly.
Because it was in the Soviet Union that different neighbors would tattle on other neighbors. That's why, the KGB and these other organizations would show up at people's houses and knock on their door. It was because others tattled on them, because they wanted to take the spotlight off of themselves.
Sure.
So we're seeing the same administrative effort as in the Cold War on the Soviet side. And of course, people are reacting the same way. We also see it in the school systems with the division where kids tattling on their parents. That's very reminiscent of the Hitler Youth and of the Red Guard in China. The Red Guard was not like the SS. I see it presented that way, but it wasn't. It was more like the Hitler Youth. It was little kids that tattled on their parents because their parents were not good Marxists.
When Obama was still in office, I recall them putting out a phone number saying, if you hear something and
Right.
it doesn't sound quite right, call this number and, tell us who's saying it and what they're saying. And, it was that same kind of feeling. And, you put that in your head along with that picture of Joe Biden giving the speech in front of the red background. And it's just sort of like, what do these people think they're going to do? And I'll tell you something else, though. This military, and I'll give them all the accolades they deserve for World War I, World War II, Korea, Vietnam, and all the brave men and women that gave their lives in those efforts. But I got to tell you, I mean, we can't even take a country like Afghanistan, and if they think for 1 minute that they're just going to be able to somehow sweep conservatives under the rug or tell every conservative in America to turn in their guns and that everybody's just going to comply with that, they need to think again. I mean, they really, what was the saying from World War II by the Japanese vice admiral? I fear that we have awakened a sleeping giant and filled it with a terrible resolve. And that's about what we're on the verge of when we look at how our former president is being persecuted, not prosecuted, but persecuted by the left. They've totally weaponized the Department of Justice. I mean, you could almost argue we fought the American Revolution over less.
Yeah, I think that I actually see a lot of positives here. I see a lot of people waking up because when I was studying this subject matter during the pandemic, it seemed like everyone was asleep and there were some people that were mad, but most people were just kind of accepting of it. Now I'm seeing more and more people on the left are kind of had it with this. And more people are really calling out some of these absurdities. So we're not just seeing left-wing celebrities like Bill Maher and Anna Kasparian, I'm sure I'm mispronouncing that name, but they're becoming more and more anti-woke. And I see it with left-wing people that you've never heard of, kind of rank and file left-wing people that I interact with on a daily basis are rejecting woke. And I think that's a very, very positive thing so that we can finally purge woke from our school system, because as you've said, it's infected our whole society. But I feel as though the most important fight is the K through 12 fight, because it's the fight that's upstream from all these other fights that we're talking about.
Mm-hmm. No, I agree with you. So let's talk about everything you've got going. You've got the book. You've got another book about to be released. You have a third book that's in the works, and you have a website. You have a podcast. How can people who want to join this fight, and buying the book's a good start, but how can people who want to join you in this fight join with Jared Julia and actually become a part of this?
Sure, yeah. At www.jaredjulia.com, I've got all of the research that I did, so you can look up all the different things that I looked at while I was writing the book. And you can, and I also have links to all of these different parents' rights organizations. There's so many wonderful ones out there. Moms for Liberty, Alvin Louie at courageisahabit.org. I mean, these are great organizations that I encourage people to become a part of. And also, if you want to buy the book, it's available on Amazon. It's an international bestseller. And or you could just Google critical feather theory and find the book that way. So appreciate anyone's support. And I really just want to funnel parents that care about this on both the left and the right. Parents that care about this, I just want to funnel them to these parents' rights organizations that, so that they can really fight against this madness. Because like I was saying before, you really can't do it alone.
I don't see how you could, because anytime one parent tries to stand up, they just get shot down. I'll give you an example. There was a woman who was give me a second. Okay, OnlyFans model. And I've never been to OnlyFans, but unless I'm just really guessing wrong here, that's probably a video chat site where you go, you give them your credit card number, and then the girl on the other side of the screen will do whatever you ask her to do. So
Right.
there was a mother who took issue with the fact that this OnlyFans model had a big picture, magnetic picture of herself and her OnlyFans address on the back of her SUV, and she would come to the school and pick her son up every day. And there would be this OnlyFans mom who's trying to get, I guess, anyone who sees the sign to go online and look it up. So she goes to the school and says, I really think you need to talk to that parent and tell her that what she's advertising is a sexually related business, and she really shouldn't be
Right.
pulling through the school parking lot with this. What'd they do? They expelled the kid of the mom who complained.
Oh man,
Yeah,
unbelievable.
that's the kind of crazy nonsense that is going on in the schools. I have maybe one positive story about it. I had a woman who came on, and I'm sticking on the name, but she had written a book called How to Raise Conservative Kids in a Woke City. And she had been working with her kids, and every year before the school starts, she goes in and talks to all of her kids' teachers, and she says, listen up. I'm not sending my kid here to learn your personal political ideology or what you think about transvestites and transsexuals. I'm here
Right.
for you to teach the subject that you've been assigned to teach. And that's the only reason I'm sending my kids here. And I have to tell you that her kid, who I think was 12 at the time, walks into his classroom. There's a substitute teacher there. It's basically a guy with a pair of fake watermelon-sized boobs.
Oh
And
my God.
the kid looks up, sees the substitute teacher, doesn't say anything, just gets up and walks out, goes down to the principal's office and says, I'm pretty sure my mom and dad would not want me to be in this classroom today. And
Wow.
because the mom had already gone down before the school started and talked to all the teachers and talked to the principal said, I've met your mom. I'm certain that's correct. Tell you what, I'm going to give you the day off. And called the mom and said, you can come pick him up. No problem. And it was actually handled correctly, except for the fact that the other
Right.
kids had to sit there and suffer through the fake boobs teacher. But it doesn't usually happen that way. It normally happens that the parent that gets upset and goes down and tries to do the right thing is the one that ends up getting targeted. So I think your point about don't do it alone, get involved in a group, because I can tell you, even when 2 or 3 parents go down to the school at one
Right.
time, and I've had this experience as one of the parents, it suddenly gets their attention. And
Yes.
but if you go down by yourself, you're going to become the target. You're going to get shot down. It's kind of like in New York, if you save a streetcar full of people or a bus full of people from getting killed, you end up being charged. So now tell me, normally when I interview someone, I always have this thing inside me, gee whiz, was there something they wanted me to ask that I didn't ask? So I'm going to ask you, is there anything about your operation, your podcast, your website, your books, anything that you want to say to my listeners before you go?
Yeah, well, I just, want to say, keep the faith, that things are getting better, and but it's still important that you get involved and that you push back against this madness, because it is not compassion. They are not going to eventually get rid of racism and all forms of unfairness. They're not going to right the racial wrongs of the past. They're not doing any of those things. They're really just going to tear down our communities. And, we've got to push back against this. But the nice thing is, take heart, we're winning. So that's a good thing.
All right. So once again, the name of the book is The Red Offenders Critical Feather Theory by Jared Julia, and illustrated. We want to give those are some really good illustrations. So let's give Harry Avira some credit. They did an absolutely fantastic job on that. There's also the website, jaredjulia.com, and there are all kind of links and things that you can do to get involved. And there's also Jared's podcast. So don't just sit there and complain about it, because if you complain about it and you don't try to take part in the solution, you're just griping. So once again, Jared, thanks for being on the show today. It was an honor to have you, and look forward to having you back when the next book comes out.
Oh, great. Wonderful. Thank you so much, Mark.
Okay. Have a great day.
Thank you. You as well.
You've been listening to the Tea Party Power Hour with Mark Gillar.